Welcome to The Adaptive Mind, where we talk with experts about practical, effective approaches to breaking habits and changing behavior. I'm your host, Brady Dowling. I'm glad you're listening. After the episode, be sure to head over to theadaptivemind.com, where you'll find the full show notes and transcript from our discussion, as well as an episode cheat sheet. Each cheat sheet has the most important points, quotable moments, and specific actions you can take to implement the strategies we discuss. Head to theadaptivemind.com to access a cheat sheet for every episode. Today's episode is the first of a two-part series focused on using music as a coping mechanism and a tool to promote neuroplasticity and change. In this first episode, Andy and I dig into the act of singing, and our next episode will focus on solo music listening. I really enjoyed my conversation with Andy, and I think you will too. Welcome to this episode of The Adaptive Mind, and today we have Andy Tubman. Andy is a board-certified music therapist, a public speaker, and expert in music and the brain. He's also the co-founder and chief clinical officer at SingFit, where he leads the creation of therapeutic singing programs for seniors. Andy, welcome to the show.
Cheers. Thanks so much.
So to start, could you begin by explaining what therapeutic music actually is and how it differs from just listening to music for enjoyment?
I'll go a little bit deeper. There's music therapy, which is clinical, right? Based in diagnosis, and an actual music therapist being there. There's therapeutic music, which is what SingFit is doing, and a lot of folks in technology world are trying to get into, which is utilizing music in some, I would say, quantifiable way and probably powered through tech. And then there's people self-medicating or simply listening to music the way they think is best, what makes them feel best, which has happened, for millennia, right? So I would say there's three main categories. Yeah.
Got it. And so how does engaging with music and especially singing, how does that affect our brains and how does that contribute to our emotional well-being?
So very, very high level. The singing process is kind of like your ultimate brain engager, right? Because what's happening is as soon as you're singing, whether there's music surrounding you or not, there's time that is being divided, right? Because that's how your brain works in terms of music. So a song. So your brain starts dividing things in time. Then you start engaging language center with lyrics, motor centers with motor planting and lips and muscular, right? Timing, motor planning, subcortical, topical, short-term, long-term. The whole brain is being integrated and activated to produce, like the simplest song or the most complex song. And so to me, it's really about, being intentful about why you're singing. And sometimes it's just to have fun and boost those neurochemicals, because that's the other thing that singing has been proven to show, that it boosts endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, regulates cortisol, our stress. So between those positive neurochemical regulations and releases and brain activation, you have kind of like a 1-2 punch on like with singing to support mood and support interactivity and support brain health. Like it does a lot.
And so building off of that, what is it about music and particularly singing that makes it such an effective and such a powerful tool for expressing or oftentimes releasing our emotions?
Well, I would say pretty much, unless you are, not to be dark, but like literally on your deathbed and don't have the ability to make any vocal sounds,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very finite number in our population on the earth. Everybody else can do it, right? Everybody can vocalize. everybody has grown up, regardless of culture, has grown up with songs that are integrated literally into their neural network, into their cellular map. And so to vocalize these, it is just, it can be a very positive, like I said, neurologically, um, in terms of brain integration, in terms of mood, in terms of respiratory and central nervous system affect. It's all pretty positive, especially if you're doing it on a regular basis, like you would take vitamins or exercise on a regular basis.
Right. I mean, that totally makes sense. I think so. I have small kids, and I feel like two of the things that are encouraged for rearing kids is like you read every day, and then I feel like you also sing hand in hand, like you sing to your kids because that's just what you do that like helps them in so many ways that we don't even think about.
Well, exactly. So, like, why have lullabies, been sung since the beginning of time, both while child is in utero and out, right? Regardless of, if someone 2,000 years ago understood the science, what is actually happening is you are building neural net, like language and timing and all these different things that listening, a perceptive, is stimulating, right? You're building a better scaffolding for the child, right? A better neuroscaffolding by utilizing music in a joyful, loving, supportive way, right? And so the side effects are basically no side effects, So it's a very positive interaction, like you're pointing out.
Yeah, and from what you said earlier, it sounds like listening to music has a lot of these benefits, but then also even being the one that's singing, there are a lot of additional processes that are happening that are even adding to the experience.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you're on it. So the thing is um, that listening is a very interesting thing because there are many companies and apps and massive tech companies. All these people they're trying to sell product, and because people listen to, I can't remember how many hours on average of music a day, they're like, oh, they're already doing this, so we can just put here's, this is how you listen so you're calm, and this is how you listen to optimize your biking experience, and this is how you listen. But the thing is that listening has a lot of different functions and use, and some is not so effective and some would be more effective, and it's depending on the goal. So again, just like I was saying about singing, it's not that you have to overanalyze what your goal is and be a clinician, but understanding your intent, when you're listening and while you're singing and doing music, is often a good thing. Just to kind of be generally aware. Um, I think that the listening process can be very powerful, but it can also be background and confusing to someone on the autistic spectrum, right? And so it's specific to scenarios and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so talking about why you're doing what you're doing, that makes me think of I don't lift weights very much, but just really like the mind body connection. And it seems like that's kind of what you're talking about here, is having that intention and really awareness of what you're doing in that moment.
Yeah, yeah, you got it. And think about, there's a research project that's a really good example of this, and this is more on the clinical side, but it also translates to the non-clinical. Is that people with Parkinson's who have neurodegenerative, who have challenges with walking, right? They're shaking, their musculature is challenged, their central nervous system, there's challenges. So they have challenges with walking. And what this research showed was that they started people walking to favorite music, their preferred music that is in a tempo to what their walking general walking tempo would be. And so they learn to start singing these songs while they're walking. And what they found was that it helped their gait, how they walked and how fluidly they walked and how fast they walked, right? And then they trained them to sing the songs in their head without the music. And it transferred, right? So this processing, you know, it really is a very interesting how deep the neural conditioning is with music and how deep it can be.
Yeah, very interesting. So let's change gears just a little bit.
Yeah, sorry if I'm too clinical here, but
No,
yeah.
that's great. It's fascinating. I could keep talking about it, but thinking about someone that wants to break a habit or change their behavior in some way, let's say cutting back on social media or quitting drinking, can you use music or singing to promote neuroplasticity in order to kind of achieve that effect?
Yeah, man. So when it comes to different kinds of addictions and addiction in terms of drinking or whether it's just drinking too much and there's not like an actual problem, or the social media, this is all to me a matter of degree, right? On how it's how much you're doing, how much it's affecting your life and everything. But in the end, you're getting oxytocin and dopamine hits from doing these things. And with drinking, you're getting different kinds of pleasure centers being stimulated. So when it comes to singing, like I said, when you start integrating the whole brain and increasing your dopamine and serotonin and regulating this cortisol, I'm not saying it's like a hit of cocaine, right? Because or a given Prozac pill, because these things are very specific and very effective. However, when you're using singing, and I like to say active music making, when you're making the music, which is what singing is, you really are activating and getting these dopamines and all these neurochemicals flowing. And to me, if you can kind of latch on to a regular, uh, routine of that, that can substitute for all these different kinds of hits and pleasure centers being stimulated by what might be not so positive scenarios, right? So this is a very natural, the singing process and the active music making and even the listening in the right scenarios is a natural way to stimulate all of these pleasure centers and substitute for what people are looking for.
I see. So it sounds like there's almost a twofold benefit where one is you have just kind of this pleasurable experience where you're listening to music and you're singing along with it maybe, and then the second, or maybe the second part of it, is that as you're doing that time over time, it can become the replacement behavior, where that you're getting this pleasure or you have this positive experience, and so perhaps you can just continue on with this constructive behavior, instead of the destructive behavior, however you've deemed that to be.
Yeah. And I think exactly, well said. And I think it's like, you know, there's it's not the exact right analogy, but I think that runners after a while they get to a certain level of conditioning and they start experiencing a runner's high, right? They start getting on the adrenaline and it just starts, and then they need to do it all the time, right? The runners, like they're nuts, right? They're going up the mountains and like going crazy. To get into a daily yoga practice, if you will, of making music and singing over time, what people find is, especially when it comes to the singing and you're increasing that oxygen flow, you really you really feel different after 20 minutes of singing or 30 minutes of singing. Drumming is not too far behind. If you're drumming in a group or by yourself and you really are in time and you're grooving, you're coordinating muscles and different body parts and everything, when you're done, like, your body's buzzing, right? So that buzz, that word, it is analogous to a buzz from alcohol. Not, I don't think by mistake. Like, it is, the both are literally happening, in certain ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't consider myself a singer, but I enjoy singing by myself. And I don't think I really have sung for 20 consecutive minutes before. So that's something that I'll have to try and experience what that feels like.
Yeah, I think that that pop, like, it's not that pop music hasn't been there since the beginning of time, right? Like, there's been the the castrato in Rome, the beautiful opera singer, the, like, it's not that the brilliant artist hasn't been there to entertain us since the beginning of time, but I think over the last 100 years, the the, the marketing around pop music has done our society a disservice, in that you who enjoy singing 100 years ago would probably be leading the band on your front porch with your family, right? Or doing a regular church thing, or going, like, doing the communal, banjo, like, whatever the hell it was. And because, Whitney Houston is so unbelievably brilliant at vocals, and now there's all these hateful vocal shows and all these different things, that our perception is that, oh, I can't do that, right? Like, oh, they're so good and I'm not good. And in terms of actually being a clinical music therapist, I mean, I fight that all the time, because it's not the point. The point is, as Yoda would say, to do, not to try, right? Like, you don't need to try to be Whitney Houston. Nobody is Whitney Houston. And I mean that. All the rest of the singers who are pop stars that try to be Whitney. But you know what I mean? It's the doing that really is the benefit. It's true.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting perspective. I think it's very valuable for me and probably a lot of people. I think we have this perspective about, I'm a big basketball fan, so we see like LeBron James and we're like, I couldn't do that. I would have to put in too much time to do that. For me, I don't care because I like playing basketball. I've played it enough that I don't care if I'm as good as him. But yeah, that kind of attitude, like, falls over and pervades over into other things. When it comes to running, I'm also not a runner, but sometimes I'll just go out for a run and I don't care that I'm not at a marathon pace. But
Yeah.
like you said, when it comes to singing, I'm worried that someone's going to say I'm out of tune or that I sound bad. And so I only sing in front of my kids and my wife. It really, maybe at church, but only because I'm being drowned out by other people.
Yes. Well, there's reasons for that too, right? Like, that singing, to some people, it can be emotionally exposing, right? Which is honestly why it can be so effective in a therapeutic setting, or as a self-help tool, right? Because even if you're not doing this with anybody else and it's just a very personal, intimate relationship with music, and you're singing for yourself or for your kids, right? Who do not care what your voice sounds like. They just want your voice, right? Um, this is it's a very positive tool, I guess, is in the end, is what I'm saying.
So, specifically talking now about addictions and habits, what kind of benefits of singing and music could people expect, or even have you seen that have benefited people in overcoming certain behaviors?
Well, I mean, I guess the main thing is the substitution of, these neurochemicals and this level of organization neurologically and cognitively that music brings to the table. If someone's singing, they're very organized, so they're not feeling anxious, right? It
Mm.
also helps that the cortisol is getting regulated, but this literally, right? I found my thrill. You're literally being regulated in time, so you're getting organized. And so this idea of organization and these different areas of the brain, it's again a beautiful substitute for these different substances that someone would be addicted to, right? To help kind of satiate the need for all of this. And that would be with when you're talking about addiction, to really look, in addition to having these musical tools, to really take a very deep look at where these addictions are coming from. Is that, a good amount physiological, neurological, or are they there because you're substituting, you're trying to cover up other things? I mean, this is the rehab process is a long process, but the musical tool can be very beneficial from the beginning through, a clean lifestyle.
Yeah. And that actually, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I know that when I'm procrastinating something, or um, if I'm just stuck on YouTube, or like a lot of times my thoughts feel non-linear. They feel like all over the place. And
Yeah,
so the way that you described that, of like going through this time time bound and like very almost linear process, seems like a natural antidote to that kind of like scatterbrained feeling and
exactly.
that scatterbrained process.
Exactly. So like to use that um, to help with focus, to use that to distract yourself. The thing is that, it could easily be perceived that, oh, I'm getting controlled, or this, like, I like to be free and blah. But the thing is this kind of idea is like, it doesn't matter what artist. Like if you're singing along with Katy Perry, right? The level of organization that occurs, you don't care if you're being controlled, and you're willing to be organized. You know what I mean? Because it feels good, because it's music. So it's a soft in. It's like a soft, like a therapeutic in that goes very deep, but that can just be like, oh, I love Katy Perry, boom, and it's simple and sweet.
Yeah, it makes me actually think of meditation, got like guided meditations where you have to like buy into this, not necessarily buy in, but you have to be, suggestible to an extent. You have to like be there for it. And it sounds very similar to what you're describing, where like, yeah, I might be singing words to a song. I didn't write it, but I'm like, I'm here for it. I'm buying into this process.
Yeah, and I like to think that when it comes to doing something healthy for oneself, I, it, often, to get off the couch, to stop looking at social media, to just do the actual function of changing a process, the path of least resistance is often the way to go. And so I don't know why I'm talking about Katy Perry, but whoever it is, Aerosmith, or you know whatever country artist, whoever you might be okay with, that it takes to push play, right? The path of least resistance. Like if you're just like, it's a couch, but if you're like, I could hear that song, okay, whatever, chunk. Now you're starting to move away, and so maybe that song leads to you putting headphones on and getting out and walking to that song. right? So what is that path of least resistance? And music is often a very easy, especially the listening part, right? Which is why people are trying to market it so hard, right? With tech and everything. But it is very easy to engage in. So it's good in that sense.
Yeah. So going off of that resistance to continue on that,
Yeah.
what are some challenges that you see or that you've seen with people adopting or starting to do some kind of therapeutic music or song therapy?
Well, some of the biggest resistance come from when folks are having these addictive challenges and they come to the table with things like, oh, my parents said I wasn't good at piano, or my teacher didn't like my voice. And I'm just like, how could they do it? Right? Like, and like the funny thing is that one's musical expression is is pretty vulnerable, right? And especially as a young person. And so I've seen a lot of scenarios where kids, are not supported, and then they grow up and unfortunately they whatever life brings them and they have these different challenges, and then there's yet another layer to unfold before they can really kind of dive into the musical process. Um, I think which musical process, for someone to dive in to make that transition, um, is really important. Something that's going to lead to something sustainable, or something that is sustainable right off the bat. Learning instruments or playing songs, like which process to dive into. That is the path of least resistance, or the beginning of the path. That's maybe where some music therapy consult could help, but intelligent people can utilize it on their own.
Yeah. So that's a perfect segue. So for someone that's like, this Andy guy knows exactly what he's talking about, I'm all in, I want to do this. If they have 5 minutes right now, how would you say for somebody to get started?
Dance and sing. It's pretty simple, right? Like, if you're feeling down, like, figure out a couple songs that you like to move to, and that you like to sing to, and get moving. Like, it's about energy, right? And the music is a beautiful vehicle to create that flow of energy. And to me, that's a pretty simple path of you know of engaging in a positive experience. Unfortunately, again, like, the dancing process is like, oh, me and the girls are going to go out and we're partying, we're dancing tonight. And it's associated with just, being buzzed and partying and whatever that is for you, and the dancing. But I guarantee that if you put on 4 and 5 songs in your living room and you push play and you get your kids up with you and you're all dancing for 20 minutes, your perception and your lens of the world is going to be different.
Nice. So you said it's very simple, and that's true. And you also said having a couple of songs that you basically can go to. So having a little bit of preparation, it sounds like, but then just go for it and just do it.
Yeah, and so that's easy to say sometimes, if especially if someone's in a challenging state. And so what I would suggest, and like I said, dancing is great because it's a full body experience. Singing is also uh, possibly more neurologically focused, right? And about the regulation of the cortisol and things. But both are beautiful. And my last thought on it is simply that, if be conscious of how you're starting, because first impressions, first feelings are often the most important. If you're the type of person who's down, and when they're down, they only like fun, up-tempo music, make sure those songs you're singing or that playlist you're singing are up-tempo and fun and not negative. There's a very large majority of people that when they're down and they hear that up-tempo and positive stuff, they're like, right? I can't deal with that crap. It's bubblegum, junk. So know yourself, understand your intent is in this scenario, we're talking about possibly changing your mood a bit after 3 to 5 songs, and try to match your energetically where you are. You might have a couple different playlists to go to, right? One starting high, one starting in the middle, and one starting low, and have those songs move away from that energetic state. So a playlists of singing and playlists of dancing and moving that you're kind of already sorted with can be a positive, way to get in.
Great. That's really insightful. So, moving to the last thought here, is there any body of research or anything that you think is particularly interesting and maybe like the future of therapeutic music, or things that we should be exploring more?
I think where things are going and what is interesting is how to integrate music, singing, movement with a variety of biometrics, right, and data. And I say this not without, knowing the level of responsibility that the creators of these programs need to have, I think, if I may get on the soapbox, and not just create product to sell that, right? Like to create product to understand what the deeper clinical implications are, and why they're doing what they're doing, and when they get different kinds of biometrics from different sources on people, that data is considered in a very ethical way and is not sold, is not used for a negative process. So I'll just get off my soapbox there. But as long as that is occurring, like the potential for collecting accelerometers, like how much movement your hand is making, heart rate variation, heart rate in general, blood oxygenation, these kinds of biometrics can be integrated into different kinds of musical programming, so that, and which is what we do at SingFit, right, in general, so that when you are looking to change your mood, the app does that pre-work for you and tracks how it's affecting you.
Awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
really
ethically, but good. But ethically, but like, how do you use it? That effectively, I think it's where things are going. I think.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for all of your really good insights. I think there are like a lot of people that can take a lot of things out of this, but also, as you mentioned, everything is very individual. And so, certain people I'm sure can benefit even more, and they'll really hone in on certain parts of what we've talked about. So thank you again for joining. I really appreciate it, Andy.
Yeah. And I'm accessible, within singfit.com. And if folks need, interactions or guidance or suggestions or research, happy to, interact and give some feedback. And I want to thank you, Brady, for having me on. It's really nice.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to include your contact info and links in the show notes.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Andy.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Adaptive Mind, brought to you by Neurture. the research-based app for overcoming unwanted or addictive behaviors. I hope you found our conversation insightful and inspiring. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing these learnings to people that need them. Remember that you have an adaptive mind that does incredible things every day, and it's capable of even more. We'll see you in the next episode.